Good morning, everyone. Thanks for coming down on the first Monday of the conference. It's great to have such a great panel here, decision makers in cities and boroughs across the UK. I'm Jon Ackroyd. I'm a co-founder of Ackroyd Lowrie and the Breakfast Club Briefing, this is part of the session. I've always been passionate about cities, and we do sustainable projects up and down the country, particularly around retrofit and regeneration. I guess one of the things we see as most important is bringing people from different backgrounds into the built environment. So we've set up a program called the AL Academy, which brings in people from different backgrounds, obviously in T-levels, BTECs, and the opportunity to get paid work so that they can qualify as architects, which otherwise isn't always an option for many people. The BCB, the Breakfast Club Briefing, was set up really to be an interdisciplinary, sort of cross-party discussion place to face the challenges that are facing our industry at the moment. There's many. We tend to bring thought leaders like the panel today to bring their ideas about how we can solve some of these challenges. That leads on to the question for today. How can we design and build cities that will provide a fairer future? It couldn't be better timed. We've got an election upcoming soon, and actually cities are facing some of their biggest challenges that we've ever faced, be it lack of housing, schools that are collapsing, transport issues, and now rollback of green policies in the last week or two. It'll be really interesting to hear our panel reflect on good and bad practice. We know as an industry we're not always perfect, there's a lot to learn, and how we can reframe challenges into opportunities around cities. I'll hand over to Ollie, who will introduce the panel. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jon. So amazing panel, as Jon mentioned. We have Cllr Bella Sankey, leader of Brighton and Hove City Council, Councillor Kieran Williams, leader of the London Borough of Southwark Council, Mayor Marvin Rees, Mayor of Bristol City, Councillor Krupa Sheth, Cabinet Member for Environment, Infrastructure and Climate Action, and Councillor Mete Coban, Cabinet Member for Climate Change, Environment, Transport at the London Borough of Hackney. So thank you very much to the panel. And I'd like to start the questions with a question for Councillor Sankey. You're obviously leader of one of the most diverse and thriving authorities in the UK. What are the lessons that you've learned about how you can deliver much needed house building whilst not losing what makes it special to be part of the community in your local authority?
Thanks very much. Thanks very much for the question. So just to give a bit of context here, I am the new leader of Brighton Hove City Council. We took back control of the council in May following the local elections after 20 years of no overall control. And so I'll start by saying, I don't think we've yet got it right on house building in Brighton and Hove because we've had 20 years of stagnation, inability to make decisions, really poor, weak leadership, I would argue, by the minority Green administrations that we've had in that time. So that's 7 years of Green-led administrations in Brighton and Hove. Ironically, not being very green in my book and not taking decisions for the long term, the catchphrase of the month. But we have done some things well when we've been in minority leadership. And I think house building sustainably across our city, ensuring that where we put our social and council homes is diverse, it's in all corners of the city, and ensuring that we are building homes and not just units of accommodation. And I think that's where things have sometimes gone wrong in the past. So we've got a very clear commitment in Brighton and Hove that we build homes and communities. We build sustainably with heat pumps and solar, and we ensure that these are places where communities can flourish and people can live happy, fulfilled and dignified lives. We want to ramp up our house building operation because at the moment we have 50 households a week presenting as homeless on the day in Brighton and Hove, and that's huge. We've got around 2,000 people in temporary accommodation, so we need to do much better. And we need a Labour government to enable us to do that. But to start with, we are going to ramp up our house building on brownfield sites.
Thank you very much. And so I think there's regeneration has almost become, a sort of a word associated with, I think it's on the borderline of becoming a sort of dirty word. How, Mayor Rees, can we harness the power of regeneration to make sure that people aren't sort of left behind by the transformation of cities?
Well, I mean, the first thing is to do it on purpose. I think one of the worst things we can do is just set a process off and just watch it run and then try and catch up with that process with a couple of projects, getting black and brown people on site and all the rest of it, right? You've got to define from the start what a successful regeneration would be. And part of that is about making sure you're really tuned into the dangers of gentrification, as we've been in Bristol. So the money comes in and the standing communities flow out, right? As people begin to speculate. So I think at the heart, I've put a few things in place for how we make sure regeneration works for people. One is it has to be part of a long-term plan, and that's not even rocket science. But the longer the commitment we can make, the more predictable the future is we'll be moving into, or at least we'll have more control over it. And then we can line up that skills pipeline. We can prepare our communities for the changes that are coming. Secondly, how do we build assets and resources into existing communities in and around whatever regenerations are going on? I think making sure people have affordable homes in the first instance, good health, so that when those big forces of regeneration come on, they've got the assets that allow them to resist the negative impacts of those forces. And then you do have to have specific interventions, just like we've heard here. We've got a massive regeneration going on in the middle of Bristol right now behind Temple Meads. It runs into the billions, tens of thousands of 10,000 homes, 22,000 jobs, one of the biggest in Europe. But so we talk to those key organizations involved in that all the time about our local supply chain. We bring communities in, they go out and see our communities, so we're really tuned in. But it is also very easy. You can see the tendency to just get on with the big numbers and the big projects and stop talking about the fact that there will be unintended consequences. So it has to be forefront of your mind all the time.
And how do you make sure that these communities that you're talking about get engaged as part of the conversation in regeneration? What kind of tools and methodologies are there to sort of make sure these voices are heard?
So we work with like kind of trusted and established groups like Brighton Hove Settlement. There's an organisation called Babasa, run by an amazing guy called Poku, does mentoring for young people. We've run sessions actually at a mixed martial arts gym that has loads of kids and their parents turning up. With our community development team, amazing guy in our team called Mohammed Al Sharif, Sudanese background guy. We consciously go out and get the community to come on site. I'm always wary about saying that a little bit, because getting people to turn up and have the chat isn't necessarily engagement. That can be the window dressing, right? That justifies it. But you can't do the engagement unless you're getting people on site and having those conversations. And then you have to make it real. Where, okay, now you're here. Here's what the job's going to look like on this site. And I would just say, by the way, that this is one of the reasons I'm so frustrated about the way national government fund local government in this short-term, choppy, changey way. Because if we can plan 4 years ahead, we can say, hey, people come in, here's a course, and in 4 years, we're going to have 200 jobs doing this on this site, and they're going to pay you probably about 50, 60 grand, right? Then you can make the deal. And those communities who've been consulted in the past but have been jaded because those consultations didn't go anywhere, you can shake hands and you've got a certainty deal. You've got some certainty in that.
Thank you very much, Councillor Williams. I see you nodding along there, and I think Southwark have obviously come in and there's been a legacy of sort of transformation in the borough. What are the things that Mayor Rees mentioned there that resonated with you, and have you got some good examples and maybe some less good examples from within the borough for successful regeneration?
I suppose I just want to go back to the starting point, the premise of this discussion, and fairness is the thing that is wrong with our cities. They are not fair. Now, I could talk about any city around the country. I could talk about here in Liverpool or Manchester, but I'll talk about London because that's my city. We're in a situation where a quarter of our population are living in poverty. 2 in every 5 children, where 1 in 23 children in London are now living in temporary accommodation. This is a deeply dysfunctional society, and that impact is not just toxic for those people at the bottom, it's toxic, as we know, for people across the spectrum. So, it makes our cities less safe, less healthy, less prosperous, and we've got to turn those things around. But you can't do that to people, right? And we've all had to go on a journey of how you get this right. And I'll talk a little bit about what we're doing on estate renewal as one example. So we've had to move on, and how do you get it right? We've got these estates in Southwark. We're the largest council landlord in London. But we've got these estates that were badly built, are reaching the end of their life, and we have to change them so people can have decent homes. But that can't be a process that leaves people feeling disempowered in their life, feeling like something's being done to them, because that in of itself is corrosive for people. And so we've really had to work hard at how you get that right. The last two estates that we've agreed plans for, the Tustin and the Ledbury, we've had overwhelming ballots by residents for the change on their estates. And that's worked through a process of asking them, what's your manifesto for your estate? The residents of Tustin put together a manifesto, said these are the things we want to see in the change of our estate, and then having the honest conversation with them, well, look, we can't afford all of that with the money that's available, so let's sit down together and go through what's the top of your list. What can we put to one side for the moment? What do you really want to focus on? How do we get that design right for you? And the end result of that is not just new homes that are a good standard for those residents, it's extra homes in that estate. There's people saying, yeah, we'll accept a few more homes here because we know there's people on the waiting list. We've got 17,000 people on our waiting list in our borough. And it's taking people with us on that journey.
Thank you very much. Councillor Chef, rapid transformation again in Brent. How do you make sure that as well as delivering homes, regeneration actually provides health, education, jobs, these other things that we need as well as just, homes for people?
So I think in Brent, as you said, we're really passionate about regeneration. We've got great people leading on the projects. Cabinet colleagues, our leader, have been passionate from the beginning. And it's about bringing the community with you and understanding what else is needed along with regeneration. So be it NHS, more doctor surgery, looking at our school places and seeing what's needed and how we need to improve our schools as well, side by side. Looking to the environment, our parks, how do we improve them? How do we improve access for all the people be coming into the borough to live in the borough? And how do we make it attractive as well for them to want to live in the borough? What is around them that will make Brent the global hub for them to move into from where they are? I think we look at all those factors right from the beginning when we're talking to the developers, our planners are talking to them. We have that whole vision laid out right from the beginning, and then we can share that vision with the residents and bring them on board with, okay, yes, we're building, but we're also going to improve this in your area alongside it.
And to go back to Councillor Williams' point, if there's a prioritisation, and this is a question for both of the two panel members closest to me because they both share climate change as being part of their brief, is there, for us, the climate and sustainability is sort of fundamental to fairness. But sometimes if you have to provide affordable housing and, X, Y, Z, sometimes it's the environmental performance that is the thing that suffers. How do you balance up those competing priorities, Councillor Coban?
Yeah, I guess it goes back to to Mary's point around sort of purpose, right? So I'm from a place called Hackney. Hackney is, historically one of the most deprived boroughs in the UK. Actually, in 2006, it was ranked as the worst borough to live in out of 434 boroughs in the UK. Fast forward to 17 years now, it's now the place in London that you want to be. No offence to Southwark and
I've never lived there.
We've got some of the best schools in the country. It's, home of London's nightlife with Shoreditch, home of London's tech hub. And for me, it's about purpose. So we do this resident satisfaction survey where we ask people about, how do they enjoy living in the borough, whether they feel opportunities are working for them. One of the stark things that comes out of it is that 72% of people feel that the opportunities being created in the borough doesn't work for them. For me, that's a very staggering stat. And I say that as someone, I'm a son of asylum seekers. I'm brought up on one of London, Hackney's poorest council estates. And that's one of the reasons why I got into politics. But I think the point about climate, and Bella very sort of I saw your speech yesterday at the LGA rally, very eloquently puts this. The difference between the Labour Party and the Green Party, the Green Party talk about environment, the Labour Party, social justice is really at the heart of our plan for climate justice. And it's about making sure that we're actually putting money back into people's pockets in terms of their energy bills. It's about how do you create jobs. It's about the fact that, if you live in Hackney, for example, you're 10 times more likely to suffer from bad air quality than if you live in Richmond. And how do you really sort of address some of those inequalities that affect working class people? So one of the projects that we're working on in Hackney at the moment is we're a home of community energy. So we've got our community energy fund. But beyond that, what we're starting to do is we've got a residential solar project where we've got solar panels on top of our council estates, and residents are able to, for the first time, tap into the energy generated on the roof of their sort of council estates, which basically put back in about £200-300 back into their pockets. And I think that's the difference between our approach to climate than, for example, the Greens. So I think, look, climate justice has to go hand in hand with anything we're doing around region.
I think just to add to that point as well, yes, we've declared a climate emergency, most London boroughs have, and we do need to work towards it. I mean, in Brighton, we're trying to do everything we can to become carbon neutral by 2030. I'm sure a lot of other boroughs are as well, but we've also got to look at the other priorities that we have in the borough, and that doesn't mean that we just focus on the climate emergency aspect, but while we're doing those other priorities, we see how we can embed some of our policy around climate emergency into that.
Thank you. Bella, having picked up from the Greens, what do you think is that point of differentiation with the Labour way of delivering green?
There's differentiation in absolutely everything we do. We are completely separate political parties. We have separate philosophies, and we have completely separate values as well. I said yesterday in my talk that as far as I can make out in Brighton Hove, the Greens are Tories on bikes. And it's true. And just to give you some examples in Brighton Hove, not only is social justice not really part of their DNA, they're not even good at doing green stuff either. We declared a climate emergency when the city was Labour-led in 2018. I expected at the very least, taking over in 2023, there would be some sort of plan to get Brighton and Hove towards carbon neutrality by 2030, which is the target that we've set. There is no plan. There is no plan whatsoever. There are a few cycle lanes and there are a few cycle hangers, eye-catching things that they got some good press for. But there is no infrastructure plan for the city. I'm now working with Mayor Rees and his team in Bristol, who is so much further down the road, having procured Bristol City Leap, having taken a really strategic, thoughtful, long-term approach to how we get to net zero. And they're going to hopefully help us sort of fast track because we're so far behind. And that is in a city which is the only city that has tried the green experiment. 7 years of green-led administrations, and we are nowhere. So the approach is totally separate. And another thing that I'd say as well is if you now look at our city, if you map our city and you look where the EV charging points are, none of them are on our council estates. They're not good enough for people on council estates. And if you look at our roads, if you look at our infrastructure, all of our most deprived communities have been completely ignored and overlooked by the Green administration. Every single one of their policies, if you do an quality assessment on it, it does not stack up. They try to hike parking charges in our city by 300% around our main regional hospital, trying to make money off the back of nurses and claim that this is, for climate justice. It's just not on. They are Tories on bikes and they must be defeated, and we must make sure that narrative goes out from this conference. But yeah, we're now having to claw back those lost years.
Mary's, I've got a quote from you because I just love this and we resonated with something that we it's always very good.
You can get it from Twitter, didn't you?
Got it from Christian if it went wrong. If we can unlock the full potential of our cities, we can minimise the price the planet pays for hosting us in our growing numbers. Right. This is something as architects that really resonates with us. We think that cities can be the life raft of humanity. You've got to look after increasing pressures from migration, from population growth. Yeah. We think that well-planned, strategic cities are really the answer, and I hope that you agree with that. And would you be able to expand a bit upon what you said? Yeah.
Well, first off, I love to be on the panel, listening to people, and it's just back in what Bella's saying. The Greens in Bristol, and they get an easy ride because they're the teddy bears of politics. But actually, what they've done in Bristol is just recruited a load of trolls that don't really have the environmental credentials. We've just done £1 billion deal with Amoresco and Vattenfall to decarbonise our energy system. It's for real, right? And the financial stuff we need, the green stuff is not just about t-shirts and decorations. With the chief exec of Siemens, Core Cities, I chair Core Cities UK, he said, we've got the technology to solve 8% of the problem. What we don't have is the financial vehicles to get the technology rolled out. So it's yes, t-shirts and banners, but tackling climate is about Excel sheets, project managers and accountants now, because it's get the deal done. And that's what Labour Party is doing. And as we're hearing, about a just transition. And the consequences of not doing a just transition is basically rebellion. We've seen that, right? People won't come with you. But yeah, that's actually for my TED talk. If you want to up my views. Funny enough, I got attacked for that because I went to Vancouver to the big TED conference, gave the TED talk, come back and they said, oh, you flew X miles to give a 30-minute talk. Why didn't you do it by Zoom? So what? Elon Musk has flown it. Al Gore's there, not celebrating the fact that we're asked to go and talk at TED. This was the attack, an environmental green attack. Why are you talking at TED? Well, because we're doing stuff real. But the point is, most of the world live in cities now. Climate change will be won or lost in cities. Yeah. All right. Yeah. And I made a number of arguments in the talk, including that you can reach more human lives more quickly through cities than you can through any other form of human organization. All right. So if you want to decarbonize, work through cities. Also, the city level of leadership, and I'd say the borough level leadership, can move with more dynamism and more pace than national governments. Yeah. So I'm off to COP in a few weeks. So I was in COP in Glasgow and I was out last year. The national leaders are struggling to do the deal, right? But you have the mayoral level that says, yeah, I've got to build houses. The kind of homes we build and where we build them will be one of the biggest determinants of our impact on energy use in the future, right? So that's what we're talking about, well-designed cities. And we've just launched something with the RSA called the Urban Futures Report, which you can find it on the RSA website. And it is saying, let's have a plan for cities. There is no plan for the UK cities right now. We don't understand what they are, what we need them to be, and how we get them there. So let's write a plan. But what we're saying with that is, if we design our cities well, we can take advantage of density within cities and minimize the resource use required to sustain our lives around energy, around transport, around food. So you have this massive opportunity. The UK is particularly well placed, by the way, because not only do we have cities, not are we very urban, but our cities are, compared to other countries, very close together. So again, the connectivity with our cities presents us with an incredible opportunity.
Thank you very much. So, and also, I think in terms of the sheer quantity of homes that you're delivering, setting out that ambitious plan is really, obviously creating amazing results. Councillor Williams, you're obviously you've got a plan as well. Do you want to talk about that?
I'd love to. Lots of plans.
Which one?
I just want to step back again a little bit. I mean, and just critique a bit the things that are going wrong at the moment. So, when it comes to driving forwards our cities at the moment, we have a government that is actively corroding them. And I'm going to give one example that's completely toxic from London. So, we have a situation where the benefits that you can claim for housing are now capped so low that less than 3% of homes in the private rented sector in the whole city are affordable then. That's just pushing people out of the city, forcing them to live in other places. And it's forcing the people out who need to run our city every day, can't stay, and leading to a crisis. That's a deliberate government policy about not believing that cities should be somewhere where people on ordinary jobs should be able to live and ordinary incomes. And let's remember, most people claiming benefits in London are in work, or have someone in the household in work in their family. And then we've got the dysfunctionality of how the money is doled out around the country. The latest iteration of that is UK shared prosperity funding, where we're in the middle of a almighty 1.5-year row with the government about how it's spent, and indeed between government departments on how it's spent. And all of that means we're not able to get on and deliver the change that we need in our city. What we need is a situation where local places have the power to have a long-term plans to get things done and have those resources in our hands. I was delighted to hear some of the lines from Angela's speech about doing exactly that on housing, on the environment, on skills and employment yesterday. And what does that allow us to do? So I'll go back to housing. So in Southwark, we've got to a place where we're now the biggest builder of council housing in the country. That's taken us a long time to get there, though. It's taken best part of a decade to get to a point where we're building at that scale. We had to build up the internal team to be able to build that. We had to look at the plans. We had to identify the land, build the land, work out how you design homes well, work with our community to work out how you bring people on the journey that I talked about before. You can't do that if you have a government that's going to change track tomorrow and decide there's no more money for council housing. Now there's only money for this other kind of housing. Help to Buy that's only pushed house prices up. We need trust and safety. And this is not a radical concept, right? In the rest of the world, local places have agency over their budgets and their money, and they're able to get on and do these things. Now you've got a panel of people here, and there's authorities around the country who are doing our darndest to get things done, but we're fighting against a system that's not set up to help us do that. And so the Take Back Control Bill that's at the heart of Cllr's vision is exactly what we need to be doing. And it's not just about power to councils, much as I'd love that, and we'd love that, we'd love that. It's about power back to communities. It's about people having a real say over the change that happens in their community.
And what's been your experience of sort of partnering? So we work sometimes for housing associations, sometimes for local authorities, sometimes for private developers. Most successful projects seem to be where everyone works together effectively. I would like to ask the question to both of you, if that were possible. Ruth, would you like to go first? Your experience of partnering with private developers in Brighton?
So I think we have really good relations. I think it's how you form those relations and work with people. We have a great team within planning, housing, internally as well, which knows that they need to link together and work together I think if you don't work together, you don't have that link and you don't understand where the issues are. So I think Kieran mentioned earlier, TA, it's a temporary accommodation, it's a huge issue. It's a huge issue in Brent. We're looking through our budgets and we know it's going to be our biggest struggle. And it's how regeneration housing, the private sector, the developers, the housing associations all work together jointly to have an effective benefit for the boroughs and the cities.
And Kieran, you said you're now the largest house builder of affordable housing.
Council housing specifically, but yeah.
Is that in partnership or is that arm's length?
I mean, both. There's a fundamental here, isn't it? The public service doesn't have all of the money. There's loads of money out there in the private sector, and we need to make sure it's used for the things that communities need. And there's plenty of appetite to do that and do it effectively. And whether that's the work we're doing at the moment around extending South East London combined heat and power to put much lower, very, very low carbon heat into estates that are currently burning huge amounts of gas, whilst also giving them heating that's reliable and cost effective and all the other things that they desperately need. Or whether it's the work we've done to make sure that homes that are built in the borough are delivering 35% affordable homes, and that a quarter of all of those privately built homes are social rent homes, and being really specific on that. And that's a deal that we've struck with the private sector. And again, really good to hear that that's something Labour nationally will stick hard to and make sure that the homes that are built at scale, because we do need homes of every kind, and that the private sector is required to build their fair share of homes that are for those on the lower incomes.
Right. Mete, as the youngest councillor ever elected to Hackney, do you feel that this idea of fairness is unequally distributed, and that actually it's the younger generation that are almost getting affected more by some of these challenges?
Yeah, you got me worried for a sec. It's got these briefing packs on everyone. I thought you were going to bring out a quote on me. I was like, God, what have I said this time?
Just your age.
No. So look, I think, for me, it's about, again, it goes back to that question about who, right? So even when you talk about young people, there's this big assumption that young people are one big homogenous group. But actually, there's so many different intersectionalities that exist. And, depending on, whether you're in your teens and your early 20s or in a very different place, depending on obviously if you're a woman, if you're your gender, your faith, or whatever it is, it's like you have different challenges that you may face. I think one of the problems that we have in this country is you've got this growing intergenerational divide. So if you look at London, I might have my stats wrong, but the last time I checked it, I think a first-time buyer probably requires about 420 grand to buy a property on average in terms of house price. I think you need about 100k deposit on average. More than 60% of Londoners spend more than half their income just on rent. That's excluding bills. And I think, I meet people. One of my colleagues who works with me, we're going to go out on a night out, just spontaneous after work for a drink. And he said to me, Mete, do you mind if I don't sort of come out today? And I was like, yeah, sure. You don't always have to hang out with me. It's fine. And he goes to me, no. He goes, I just don't want you to take the wrong way, because it's like, if I go out today, I can't go out on the weekend. And then we just got talking, and he said to me, you know, he's from Birmingham, you know, his parents are from the Caribbean, you know, working class family, worked really hard. He's like, I've done everything the system told me to do, you know, work hard, get a good education, went to Cambridge, first in his family to go to university, you know, works in a job in London that pays him, you know, more than 40k a year, which is, you know, it's like an average salary, and it's not a bad salary in London. But even then, he has to sort of like cost out how many times he can go out in the week. And that's the challenge that we face in relation to the intergenerational divide that you have in London. And, you know, I think it's really important to have, you know, Kieran's point is really right, which is there's always this focus around, you know, leveling up the country. And I think that's really important. But I think it's really important that we understand you can't level up the UK by leveling down London too, because there are a lot of inequalities that exist in London. People like my family who, for example, without that helping hand from the Labour government in the early 2000s, wouldn't have been where we are today. So I think there's something about how do we, you know, really think through what is that offer for young people, and really talking about that bit about how do you include young people in decision making. So it's not just about, you know, setting up a youth futures commission or a young people's council or whatever it is. Actually, it's about young people taking power, right? It's about actually giving young people the opportunity to lead in their councils, in parliament, in different avenues, and actually giving them the resources that they need to be able to make decisions. Otherwise, you end up with this sort of like this sense of resentment towards older generation, which is something that we're seeing at the moment. I'll give you one stat. We do this poll with My Life, My Say and with Opinion. 73% of young people currently don't trust politicians to act in their best interest. That is really staggering.
What is it for adults though?
Well, yeah, I mean, like, well, I mean, I probably wouldn't think it's too far off at the moment, but like the fact that, you know, 73% of the young people in the UK on average don't think that politicians will act in their best interest, I think it just shows sort of the state of play where we're in, and I think it's a big problem that we've got to address as the Labour Party.
I think a lot of young people can't relate to a lot of the politicians because there aren't many young people in politics. I think, I don't know about Mete, but from my experience, it was a struggle getting in the first time around when I was so young. And it's changed a lot over the last 10 years, but I think we still need that change in politics to be more welcome to the younger generation.
And what type of things or mechanisms would help that, do you think?
Just being able to reach out to the younger generation, explain that we want to listen to your voice, we want you to explain to us what we can do for you, and also explain to them how they can get more involved, because we always have young people coming to us saying, why isn't the council doing this, or why is the government not doing that? It's trying to, you know, motivate them to get involved and have their say and have their voice as well.
I think the built environment's actually quite a useful tool for getting people to, like young people particularly, to sort of understand the impact of what politics means for their life. So John talked briefly about the AL Academy, but we do a lot of outreach with the New City College in Tower Hamlets, Hackney, etc. And going into these schools and explaining, you know, that you can change your built environment. You know, it's not just something that you wake up and it's there forever. You know, and there are people that get to actually design this stuff. You know, it's kind of like it really opens their eyes to reality.
Sorry, just one last thing I'll say. It comes down to a point, in my opinion, which is a massive injustice. It's a lack of education. Right, so like if you go to school and if your parents aren't, you know, like really like my parents can't speak English, so came in the 90s, can't speak English, don't have an idea of how local government or government works in the UK, they're not going to be able to offer me what that route looks like or how they can offer that to me. So, and I don't learn about it in school. So the only way that I could possibly find out how you influence or change things, if you happen, like for me, it happened because I was passionately campaigning against scrapping the EMA. When I got involved in the union then, and then what then happened is then people then started saying, oh, have you thought about getting involved in the Labour Party? This is how you get involved in local politics. This is what a councillor is. Otherwise, you know, there would be no way in which I'll be exposed to that level of information. So for me, the fundamental thing is if you want to really have a healthy democracy, you've got to really think about your education system and what does civic education look like.
Bella, what about yourself? What's the kind of the one thing that you think would make an impact on the built environment and how fair it is?
I will answer that, but I just want to pick up on the points that my colleagues have made about fairness and young people and civic education. One of the things I'm proudest of in Brighton and Hove is that this May we elected a genuinely diverse and representative Labour group onto Brighton Hove City Council. And to put that into context, in 2018, we actually were called out in Brighton and Hove by Operation Black Vote because our council was so white. And we were in some sort of league table. We made the national press. I mean, absolutely embarrassing and appalling. I was elected as a councillor for the first time in December last year. And then, as I say, for the elections in May, we had 38 councillors elected. We have young councillors, we have old councillors. Our youngest is 19, our eldest is 83. He's like Brighton Hove's Joe Biden. We have a perfectly gender balanced Labour group. We have LGBT representation, and really importantly, we have genuine racial diversity. I'm proud to be the first mixed heritage leader of Brighton Hove City Council, and I can already see in action day in, day out, when we sit down and we make decisions, we have people that have lived all their lives in various parts of the city. We have new arrivals, we have working class people, we have middle class people, we have students, we have genuinely, it is so diverse and it is so representative. And we know from the Conservative Party that representation does not equal equality or social justice, but it can really help, especially when it's in the Labour Party and you have a group of people sat down making decisions and you have all of those views and perspectives and life experiences at the table. And that's what is helping us make our really good decisions. On the big game changer, I've got to agree with what my colleagues have already referred to in different ways, which is the fundamental settlement between local government and central government. I'm shocked that we cannot do any realistic long-term planning or anything ambitious because we are getting scraps from the table. We're being forced to compete with others. This whole notion of levelling up certain bits of the country and not other bits, I mean, it's a race to the bottom. And so there needs to be a fundamental reset. And I'm so inspired and hopeful by what I've heard from our front bench at this conference already and what I know that they're working on behind the scenes when it comes back to the Take Back Control Bill and a proper long-term settlement for local government.
Marvin, I see you scribbling a lot there. What do you want to pick up on some of those topics?
Yeah, well, I mean, what Mete is saying and Bella's and Kieran's great. I think firstly, actually, there's a discussion about what is fair. So I think some of the Conservatives would say, well, it's fair just to let the dice roll, right? You'll roll the die and how it turns up. Problem is, it's loaded for some people, obviously, right? But the fundamentals of our system means that we are one of the most socially immobile countries in the OECD. All right, that's the way the system works. So we're a party that believes in intervening in systems like that. But we have a sense of what the destination is. By the way, I'll just point out, social immobility is often coined in terms of people of talent don't get the opportunity to move up. But there's another truth, right? It means that stupid people don't come down because society is stuck, right? You're born into privilege, you get on a conveyor belt and you end up in power, right? You end up, and we see evidence of that. All right. And that's by the way, the 2013-2014 Urban Social Mobility Child Poverty Report that Alan Milburn chaired says that. It said actually the relationship between socioeconomic background and the British elite is so strong, you have to, it looks like social engineering. And you have to ask the question, to what extent does the British elite reflect background or merit? All right. So it's a jokey phrase, but it's true. Secondly, picking up on the points that Bella made, and where I feel kind of really good, to be honest, platform as well at the moment is representation does matter. Yeah. In Bristol, on my cabinet, we committed to the 50-50 commitment on women in cabinet leadership. We've done that for 7 years, and I was the first person of Black African heritage to be elected mayor of any major European city. Right? When I said that in the United States at the African American Mayors event, they were just like, "What the heck?" Right? It's remarkable, right? And my deputy mayor Asher is the first Rasta cabinet member in Europe as well. Now, these things, leadership is not big decisions at any particular point in time. It can be, but often it's the daily dance. And I will say, with me and Asher being there means the tone is different. Yeah. And I'm going to give them a big up. Hargreaves Lansdowne, the chief exec, big financial firm, approached me and Asher saying, we want to run the 10,000 black interns. It's a London thing about black people and Asian people getting into finance. We want to run it in Bristol. They approached us. And then we made it possible for it to happen. And now they're running and we're getting all these people going into finance in Bristol. But we've seen the tone around conversation around inclusion and representation change in Bristol because we're there. And dare I say, because we've done all right. Same on class. And I tell you where class became a massive issue was around the Colston statue, right? When that got thrown in the harbour, the really interesting bit about that, I think more interesting than the statue, because look, if I peel the layers back on that, I will do it as I talk about it. 4 posh white kids pulled the statue down and got not guilty, right? There are layers to that. But I went to the people who organised the counter rally the week after, football lads, right? Hell's Angels. And I went to meet the organiser of that rally. Now, people were saying it was far right, but it was a bit more complex than that. So I went round to see him. One is his wife is a black woman from Zimbabwe. But secondly, I said, what's going on for the guys who turned up to the counter rally? He said, Marv, they feel like they're losing their city. And I said, they are, but they're losing it to house prices. He said, yeah, I get that. So, and again, it wasn't the danger of a city that's growing in a way that's not inclusive, both being interpreted and then driven towards kind of, extremist politics. But the reason we were able to cut through was because of my background as a single parent, refuge kid and all that type of stuff. My deputy met, and so they believed us. So when you talk about people not believing in politicians, it's difficult to say just how critical that is. And we're not just talking about the question time audience, middle class cynicism with politics. We're talking about that fundamental break between communities who genuinely have been left behind by a political system. If we can breach that gap again, then we'll be in a stronger position to lead the country. It's a change that I think the incoming Labour government can bring about.
Thank you very much. I believe we're almost running out of time. So do you want to do a quick fire, final thought? Mete, please could I ask you to kick us off with one final punchy idea for increasing the fairness of our cities?
Thanks for putting me in the spot.
Yeah. Everyone else has got a little bit of time to think.
One more time.
Okay, no, wait, I'm going to put John on the spot because
okay.
John, I'm afraid I've left you out of this conversation until now
no,
because the panel are too amazing so I've ignored you. Sorry. But what would be your one idea from an architect's perspective about, this is about blue sky thinking, this is about what policies there could be that could increase, the fairness of our cities. Where would you start with that? You don't need to give.
Where would I start with fairness of cities? I think it comes back to some of the points that were made earlier about bringing people from different backgrounds together through education. And I think finding, I'm just trying to think of one point of how we can actually, can you give me a minute on that?
So our manifesto in Brent, when we released it for the last election, was leaving no one behind. And I think the key is working together to leave no one behind.
I want to pick up on that. I think that's excellent. And I think that has to be the lens through which we look at cities. To give you one example of when that doesn't happen and when things go wrong, the former Green administration in Brighton and Hove decided to fully pedestrianise a street that had already been half pedestrianised for a long time. That had the effect of trapping a disabled woman in her home 24/7. This woman has not left her home since January. She's not been to essential medical appointments. One of the first things we did in office was to relook at that TRO to allow that woman to leave her home. It's basic dignity, it's human rights, it's equality. And I think that we haven't mentioned disability too much this morning. I think it's important to mention it. When we are designing and building our cities, we need to imagine how a disabled person, a black person, a woman, a trans person is going to get around that city, a poor person, somebody who is care experienced. You need to see everything through the lens of potential discrimination, and you need to build a city accordingly.
Thank you very much. Has anybody got any ones they want to add on to that? Because I don't want to put everybody on the spot.
I guess I'll kind of stick to my climate brief. One of the things that we're doing in Hackney is, and I'd love to see more councils do it, is we've launched the sort of leading Green New Deal in the whole of the UK. So it's a £1 million investment over the next 2 years. And that's looking at everything from tackling pollution to how we deal with community energy, how we create local green jobs. And I think really at the heart of that is about that just transition piece. So for us, a big focus on the sort of Green New Deal in Hackney. It's not just about, saving the planet. Obviously that's important, otherwise none of us will be having this conversation. But it's actually about how do we sort of like define the green jobs of the future? How do we start integrating our sort of education services within that? So we're training young people for the next set of jobs that are going to be coming available. but more importantly as well, how are we helping support some of our most vulnerable residents in relation to that point about getting around the sort of the borough. So in terms of improving more bus lanes to operate 24 hours across the borough, making sure we've got the right alternatives of transport mechanisms, making sure that we've got the right sort of energy infrastructure and everything to make sure that it happens as well. So I think how do we sort of frame the green transition and sort of that focus on social justice is really important.
Yeah, I think that ties in nicely. So I think one of the things I think about, this panel's talked about it, and I think the front bench has also talked about it, is about green growth. I think we've got a passion for retrofit and rebuilding our cities, but actually we don't have the skill set everywhere to be doing that. So I think for me, probably the biggest thing would be in that green growth, trying to build green jobs, the skills and things, some of the things that we're doing. So yeah, retrofitting our cities is very much needed, and jobs and green growth that sit behind it.
Okay. So for me, it's, as Bella and others have been saying, it's about who has a say and who's in charge. And so, as a party, we always need to be clear. We do need big government, right? So we need tax transfers that move money from those who are getting done over by society to those who aren't. We need national standards around education. We need a real safety net for people that, who are falling on hard times. Those things are important. But we also need a system where locally people have a say over what's going on for them. And so whether it's our young people in Southwark helping us design and deliver our Positive Futures Fund, young people from those communities most at risk of criminal exploitation, designing the programmes to prevent young people being that, whether it's our residents on the Tustin estate, designing the renewal of their estate, or whether it's at the bigger scale, as a borough or as a city, having a real say over the investment that's going into growing our economy, decarbonising our homes. If we don't have those things and we don't have the real representation of the community and those who are getting the hardest lives, we will always get the pull to do with people, even good intended people, pulling away into things that are not improving the lives of residents and people in our communities who are suffering the most right now.
Thank you very much. I left you out on the final points if you have one. If not,
I think it's houses. It's fundamental, isn't it? Right, having a front door you can shut. It's affordable, not just to buy, but to run, which you not have to choose between heating and eating. And as has been raised from the very beginning, houses in communities in which people get to know their neighbours. Yeah, one of the lessons. It's an obvious lesson, really, but during COVID. For all the programs we set up to get food out to people, one of the biggest sources of resilience was neighbours knocking on neighbours' doors saying, "Do I got money to get you food for you?" All right. So I say building communities, affordable homes. I did. One person running one of the theological think tank is actually doing a piece of work on childless cities now. And I don't think it's absolutely childless, but the unaffordability of family life in a city, which is a remarkable thing for us to start thinking about, the consequences of people just unable to live, in our cities. So these are things that I think as a Labour Party incoming, in the long-term plan, think about what we our cities need to be. We can start grappling with a long-term plan that local leaders desperately need to be able to work with.
Thank you very much. And thank you so much to the panel. And we're going to wrap that up now. Big round of applause. Thank you.